Good evening. Okay, just settle in your places. We'll start in 5 minutes once I get the projector going, okay? Check. Good. All right. Good evening. How wonderful it is for us to gather as parish community who just participated and celebrated the Holy Eucharist, which is the sacrament of nourishment for us, right? The Lord feeds us from this table of plenty. The season of Lent, as we often refer to it as the season of healing, season of growth. It is the spiritual spring. So today's topic for today, tomorrow, and Wednesday is what you see up there. Lent, a season of for integral healing. Father Brian Silva. You will see him tomorrow morning. He's a professor at Oblate School of Theology, a clinical psychologist who has worked quite a number of years with Oblates, and he teaches now at Oblate School of Theology. He is the director for internship program. Internship is between 5 years of our graduate studies. Each diocese does it in a different way. Like they do send us to a parish to get to know the parish life, to be immersed in parish life. So some dioceses do it after second year of graduate school, some do it after third year, and then they go back. I did at the end of my grad school. So he is in charge of the internship program. Like every discipline of study calls the students to go on internship. So for seminarians, we have internship, 1 year, 1 full year. We are sent to a parish under the direction of a pastor and a team. So he takes care of that at Oblate School of Theology, not just for San Antonio, but all the seminarians who study at Oblate School of Theology. He also teaches pastoral counseling and pastoral theology at Oblate. So it is not an elective. Now they made it mandatory for the candidates for priesthood and ordination to study and gain some pastoral skills. And since he's a psychologist, I think he's licensed in California, but he teaches the pastoral theology and pastoral counseling. By profession, I'm not a counselor, but because we come across people with so many needs in our ministry, so we need to have at least some basics of guiding people when they come for spiritual direction or some guidance. So he teaches that. So you'll see him tomorrow morning and Wednesday. So when I asked him the topic, like what he is going to present to us, he sent me 2 articles, like any professor would do, right? Any professor, if you ask them for something, they'll say, okay, read this article. So he sent me 2 articles. The first one looked like, even the way it is printed, it looked like you had to turn multiple pages, you know, this way, this way. So this second article looked more like you read a regular paper, like a bulletin. So I took this for the convenience sake, and also it touches a lot more on spirituality than the other article. So it touches upon spiritual healing. So what I'm doing is basically going through with all of you, and at the end of tonight, I will give you this handout. So I was told a good professor or a good teacher does not give the handouts right away, right? Because what the students do, they flip the pages. So I'm not doing that. So I'll give you this copy at the end. So I printed them. So I'll give you for your reference, and that will be the one he'll be talking about tomorrow and Wednesday. So he might even go further based on this. So the topic of this article is, I hope this works. Okay. Introducing the Lenten mission A guide to psychology and its practice. So the topic is spiritual healing. So we are not talking about psychology. So he's making this as a platform to delve deep into spiritual healing. So in this article, the writer says, he begins with spiritual healing. Notice the very first sentence. Everyone, regardless of heritage, education, vocation, must come to terms with his or her own human imperfections and physical mortality. What a bold statement, right? Everyone, regardless of which country or ethnicity or whatever vocation, be a priest, deacon, physician, and even a bartender or even one who goes to college, we all must come to terms with our own imperfections. I read the title of a recent interview that one American writer had with Pope Francis. Just the title of this book is First Belong to God on Retreat with Pope Francis, the title of the book. And the author of this book is Austin, I don't know how to say his last name, Ivereigh, Avery or something, okay? Austin, his first name is Austin. So he says, quote, holiness, quoting Pope Francis, holiness is always an encounter between your weakness and God's grace, end quote. Holiness is always an encounter between my weakness and God's grace. My weakness could be my struggles, my daily struggles, my imperfections. And later on, this article would even say, my own addictions. That's where God's grace is truly at work. And the best example in our Catholic Christian tradition would be what for that? Where does God's grace meet our brokenness? Every Saturday at 3 p.m., right? Confession. That's exactly the place where our weaknesses we pour out before God in the sacrament of reconciliation to the minister of the church, the priest, and we come out with God's grace. So that is the foundational principle for healing that this article says. Regardless of who we are, we may have a PhD, we may have gone to best schools in the country, we have to come to terms with our own imperfections. And Lent is one such opportunities. To do this, one must bring one's limitations into consciousness. Okay, that's already a language of psychology, because he's going to talk about first Sigmund Freud, who's famous for psychoanalysis, an Austrian psychoanalyst. So he's already introducing that language of consciousness. For some persons, this can be done through scientific approach of psychology and its clinical application, and in psychotherapy. For other persons, faith-based persons, it can be done through prayer and religious devotions. Right? Two categories here. Some of us, so psychology is helpful, even psychotherapy is helpful to come to terms with these limitations we have in our consciousness. But more so for others, we come to understand these of our limitations more through prayer and religious devotions. Sometimes when people come for spiritual direction, they tell like their own struggles, right? Their own struggles that they go through. And out of curiosity, when I ask, what do you do when you have this difficulty with this particular struggle or temptation you face? People say, simply, I pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Or I pray the Rosary. Why? Because it takes us into a different consciousness right away. It may be out of habit, we repeat the same, what is Divine Mercy Chaplet begin with? How do we pray that? There's a particular refrain that we repeat. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. Right? And some have a very particular time to pray that devotion at 3 p.m. At the time, biblically, when Jesus died on the cross. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, you keep on repeating that. And that's how people, try to manage or seek help through their own limitations, through their own struggles of life. And next he goes back to psychotherapy, which is even deeper. First of all, I need to give this disclaimer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm a priest. So when I'm reading through this article, I just read through once. So whatever you see on the slide is whatever I highlighted here. So, because I'm not talking from my expertise, I'm talking as a kind of introduction to what Father Brian will be developing deeper on. So for many, psychotherapy clients find it a great relief to be able to incorporate religious practices into their psychological treatment. And one such example is St. John of the Cross, a mystic. Where is he from? Which country is St. John of the Cross from? Spain, right? Spain. St. John of the Cross. So in his famous writing, The Ascent of Mount Carmel, he puts forward in that the spiritual and physical benefits that result from emptying oneself in devout humility before God. How we can, in prayer, and St. John of the Cross is not a psychologist. He is a mystic who has written extensively because of deep experience of mysticism. So he says, we can gain spiritual and physical benefits when we empty ourselves. In Greek, we call that word as kenosis. Kenosis means emptying of oneself. A beautiful expression of that is found in Paul's letter to Philippians, right? Where this is called a Christological hymn. He says, though Christ is in the form of God, he did not cling on to divine prerogatives, but he humbled himself and took the form of a slave, embraced death, even death on a cross. So Christ went to such a humble level to embrace our sins. And later on Paul says, because of this, God has highly exalted Jesus, the name above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bend and every tongue should confess that he is the Kyrios, he is the Lord. But how did Jesus arrive there to being the Lord? Humility before God. So St. John of the Cross says, we can gain a lot of spiritual benefits when we empty ourselves. When we empty ourselves before God. I want to introduce my own example in this. I was away for about 6 months for seeking help for one big difficulty I was facing and I'm still dealing with. And the psychologist I was seeing, we make fun of her because the moment you go to see her, Hey, how is it going, You say what? If I ask you, how are you doing, what would you say right away? Good, good, good. And I actually tried that with many people. Like 10 people I ask at the same time. The immediate answer is good. Though we may be going through multiple feelings in us. We may be tired, we may be feeling terrible or frustrated and even disappointed. But we simply say one blanket statement, I'm good. So this particular therapist I was seeing, are you good? Then she would give me a feeling wheel. About 60, 70 feelings are there on that. Now you tell me what exactly you're feeling. So once I start talking to her, I pause at one moment. She would say, that's it? Nothing more? I would say, yeah, I have something more, but. Then she would right away say, what is that but about? Tell me more. She would make me speak up those emotions maybe I have not even touched, talking about for the past 2-3 years of my life. So that emptying before God, we do that in spiritual direction, and we do so more concretely in the sacrament of reconciliation. Right? When we have school kids for confession, they have already some list of sins that their teacher must have told them, right? So when I tell that kid, hey, you have some more, they'll go blank. So what should I create some more sins? But when it is with adults, do you have anything else to confess? They will come up with maybe some of the sins that they have not confessed. But what makes us to empty ourselves before God? It is, we're already next. What makes us empty ourselves before God is humility. It's humility. So I think I can't go by what I highlighted, I have to go by what you have there. Okay. St. John of the Cross talks about this, we have seen this, and spiritual benefits that results from emptying oneself before God in true humility. Unfortunately, many psychological schools of thought are atheistic or naively misunderstand or misinterpret spiritual experiences. And one great saint we have in our Catholic Christian tradition is who? Who talks about spiritual exercises? Ignatius of Loyola. I don't know if Father Pat, you've done the exercises? Most priests before their order, you did 30 days? Yeah.
30 days,
9 months. Oh, wow. That's a lot. Yes. That's a lot. So spiritual exercises, the Ignatius has introduced, is one of the greatest spiritual resources we have in the Catholic Church. That 30-day format is most seminarians or priests do, but even lay people can do that exercises, that you totally detach yourself from the concerns of the world and enter into deep dialogue, of course, with the scriptures. The beauty about the spiritual exercises is Ignatius deeply connects us with the Gospels. So what this article highlights is many schools of psychology are naively misunderstanding or misinterprets the benefits of spiritual exercises. And many psychotherapies can become a religion unto themselves. So now this article is trying to create how some schools of thought embrace spirituality, how some others say, no, you are different from us. We have nothing to do with spiritual life. We are just a school on our own, right? So both possibilities do exist in our society. Let's see. So the first example is the guy you see there on top, Sigmund Freud. Okay, what is he talking about, Sigmund Freud? Sigmund Freud an Austrian psychoanalyst, and his philosophy is psychoanalysis, right? Look at the danger that Sigmund Freud presented to the world of religion and faith. He tried to reduce all religious impulses to biology and sexuality. Right? For Sigmund Freud, there's no such thing as religious practice or religious connection. Everything is brought down merely to biology and sexuality. He says, if you think that sounds strange, this article says, if you think that sounds strange, just walk into any American shopping mall and you will see seductively displayed on every shelf the results of our culture's wholesale purchase of Freudian biological sexual atheism. Right? So the best example is shopping malls. Now, we don't have to go to physical shopping malls with the birth of online shopping platforms we have, right? And then realize the money we used to pay for all this seduction has "In God We Trust" written all over it. So we might wonder, who is fooling whom? So Freudian psychoanalysis has gone deep into our society, into our market society. Freud, after all, died of cancer. Okay, the image you see is not the image that the article talks about. I just put something from Canva, okay? So he died of mouth cancer. And not just that, but he died through a suicide assisted by his physician, Schur. Right? After writing so much on psychoanalysis, he died through suicide assisted by his physician, Schur. What does this show us except the absolute emptiness, spiritual emptiness of Freud's own philosophy? So he came up with this beautiful concept called psychoanalysis, that religious impulses are just merely biology and sexuality, but at the end of his life, there was this absolute emptiness in his own philosophy. So that's Sigmund Freud. Let's see now the other extreme, which comes from our Catholic Christian tradition, who is St. Francis of Assisi, right? A great saint. Was not a priest, by the way, right? He was not a priest. St. Francis of Assisi, in contrast, in the 12th century, during the 5th Crusade, crossed the battle lines at Damietta, and in an attempt to convert Malik al-Kamil, the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt, to Christianity. Right? If Christianity has entered into dialogue with Muslim world, we owe so much to this saint. He's the one who met the Sultan and brought Christianity to their land. Francis hoped that the Sultan's conversion would put an end to the fighting, but he did not convert and the fighting did not stop. Nor, surprisingly, did the Sultan kill Francis on the spot. Instead, he was so impressed with Francis' genuine spirituality. See? A person who has nothing to do with Christ, totally a different religion, he was impressed by Francis' genuine spirituality and lack of interest in materialism, that he spared his life and sent him home to preach to his own people that he might convert them. You know, from history we know St. Francis came from a pretty affluent family, but he renounced everything and found beauty and joy in that simplicity of life. Right? So his spirituality even spared him from being killed in the hands of the Sultan. In the end, Francis brought about a true conversion in the hearts of only a few. But what we do today, we might put statues of St. Francis in our gardens, right? I don't want to generalize, most of you in your backyard, we do have, in the rectory backyard, we have a statue of St. Francis. We limit him to the backyard. We don't allow him to enter our life, do we? St. Francis in our gardens, but how many of us are willing to follow his example? Living chaste lives, chastity, trusting completely in God, divine providence, and free from argumentativeness and hostility, seeking always the good of others. Well, not many. So anger and violence remain so rampant in our culture today. That is why St. Francis' famous prayer, right? What is his famous prayer? Make me a channel of your peace. How relevant that prayer even in the 21st century. As we see almost now 2 years of this war between Russia and Ukraine, and now the fresh one, Palestine and Israel, more than 3 months now. How impactful and relevant is Francis' spirituality even after almost 800 plus years or 900 years reaching. Working therapeutically, let me move. Okay. We'll go to that next slide in a couple of minutes. Working therapeutically to provide healing for religious persons, all of us, therefore requires a respect for spiritual aspirations. So, the conclusion of this first part is, if we want to experience healing, the requirement is to begin to have respect for spiritual desires. Spiritual desires, as well as an astute psychological insight. Now, all of us might not have access or the ability to have psychotherapy or regular counseling, because they're expensive, right? To see a psychologist or a psychotherapist is an expensive matter. But all of us do have access to our spiritual resources, what the church offers us for healing. But the requisite is, are we prepared to empty ourselves in humility before God? And the Lent is one such opportune times we have to empty ourselves before God in true humility. An astute psychological insight that will neither minimize psychological problems nor withdraw from them in fear. So after this article moves into healing. Healing. Is that font big enough to read for you from a distance? No? Too small? Okay. What is healing as per this article? Healing may refer to regaining physical health. That is why every 6 months or at least once a year we go to our primary care physician for a rundown of all the vitals, right? Your blood pressure, your what else? Blood sugar, then what else? Your pulse, cholesterol, heart rate, nowadays even stress levels, right? They're doing that. Stress, they ask you to jump on the treadmill and then they measure the stress the heart is going through. Healing may refer to regaining physical health. Yes, physical health is fundamental to our living. And there are many ways to go about it, ranging from traditional Western scientific medicine to alternative herbal and holistic methods. Nowadays, we are getting medicines from all over the world, like herbs, like from other Eastern countries, because we want to keep ourselves in physically good condition. So every night before I go to bed, I drink some hot water with a powder called moringa. You know that leaf, moringa leaves? You never seen that plant? Moringa plant. So it's a vegetable in India, but this vegetable tree is like a big tree. We still call it vegetable. So the powder is made by grinding its leaves. It is very good for digestion and good sleep. It's not alcohol, okay? It's just you add a tablespoon, not even half of a tablespoon, and put hot water, just go to bed. Oh yeah, it's available on Amazon. Moringa powder. Because we want to keep ourselves healthy and our guts to be healthy, so we get all this inspiration from all over the place. That's physical health. But being physically healthy is one thing, and having peace of mind is another thing entirely. Healthy people do have stress, right? They might look physically healthy, fit, but they may be having some issues psychologically. You know, for me it's a cultural shock sometimes when I hear, even our Catholic students in our school, "Father, I'm stressed." And they are in 7th grade, 6th grade. Stressed. I don't think I ever used that word in 6th grade. I'm feeling stressed. Because that's now the reality of our culture and our times. The article says, I've seen many persons, for example, who are careful to practice meditation and yoga on a daily basis, and who still have insecure lives filled with troubled, unstable relationships. Now, yoga is now an Eastern practice. Now, everywhere you see, yoga outlets are booming, right? Everybody wants to become a yoga teacher. We have stretch labs, you know. People want to get them to be stretched. You see these places now? They're coming up all over the place. But yet, we may be doing yoga so well, or meditation techniques, or breathing techniques, but our lives are still insecure, filled with troubled, unstable relationships. Why? Well, such persons use their healing practices as a sort of mask. It's kind of masking of something more deeper. To say to the world, "See, I have a spiritual life." Yet, all the while, bitterness and animosity fester in their hearts. They might look physically fit and doing all kinds of traditional practices of meditation, yoga, but sometimes we might use it as a cover-up or a mask. Unless we come to terms with what I'm masking myself with, healing doesn't begin. And such coming to terms happens, as we go back to this sentence, when we empty ourselves in humility before God. Because before God, we don't have to use filters, right? In confessions, sometimes people use filters. We don't have to use filters. That's the most genuine and safest place where we can be as we are before God. Peace of mind or mental health doesn't come from physical practices, nor can you buy it. You can pay a shaman. Who is a shaman? S-H-A-M-A-N. What does it mean? I don't know the meaning of the word. Oh, okay. You can pay a shaman to adjust your energy fields. You can wear crystals. Oh, okay. Now I get it. And you can fill your house with all the aromatherapy scents in the world. but it won't heal you of the inner anger and loneliness that torments you. These unconscious wounds can be healed only by facing up to their origins. Wow, that's a bold statement. These unconscious wounds of our life can only be healed by facing up to their origins and making peace with them, coming to terms with our own inner self. And Lent is that time. That's why last Sunday's gospel, we journeyed with Jesus into the desert, right? Often desert is equated to be a place of lifelessness. But through the desert comes a great transformation. This past Sunday, we journeyed with Jesus to the mountain. Next Sunday, we journey with Jesus to the well. Yeah. Next following Sunday will be the road. And the fifth Sunday, we meet Jesus at the tomb as he raises Lazarus to life. But those gospels are particularly for those having the scrutinies for receiving sacraments at Easter. But nevertheless, Jesus meets us in these 5 different places during the season of Lent. So this making peace with our inner self. Oh, past. Okay. All this we have seen. Okay, next is about John of God. This making peace with our inner self is not an easy process. Coming to terms, looking through our own inner self is not an easy process. It's a painful process. In fact, most persons will do just about anything to avoid it. Right? I think I read it somewhere. Let me read that. I don't know the author, but I know for sure. I said this in the homily a couple of Sundays ago. Oh yeah, Rumi. Rumi, you know Rumi? A Persian poet, 13th century Persian poet. He said, the wound is the place where the light enters. Oftentimes we consider wound as, no, we don't want to go there, right? We don't want to touch it. But Rumi says, wound is the place where the light enters. That wounds that we carry, unless we open up ourselves with this, it's a painful process to tell somebody, right? That's why going to confession is not an easy thing. Especially when people go for Acts retreat. They really bring all the baggage and just say, I have nothing to do with it from today because I made a confession. The one confession I heard, like in my first year, the person, can he say this for that? Without naming the person, he has been the longest for confession, right? That he has been in confession, he has not been to confession for a long time. Can I mention the years? The time he has not been to confession?
As long as it's nobody that never be tracked.
Oh, okay, none of you, I don't even know that person. So, so from somewhere, from a different parish, okay? He said, Father, my last confession was 50 years ago. He took like good 1 hour. I said, okay, go for it. Right? That was about 6 years ago. It's a painful process. Painful, in fact, that most persons will do just about anything to avoid it. And that's why, in order to be truly healed, you have to face your inner vulnerability. Vulnerability is power. Without hiding behind defenses such as alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, food, gambling, sex, sports, television, and so on. Again, I want to give my own experience. Self-medication, this is called. Self-medicating behaviors. And while I was away, my thinking was like, okay, self-medication is you do with drugs or alcohol with. But I was greatly surprised when somebody said, what you're doing is self-medication. Self-medication is in multiple formats. We do that because we don't want to go to that inner vulnerable area of ourselves. Try to hide it behind with some defenses. This painful process, if you stick with it courageously and faithfully, leads to the form of healing that we can get from psychotherapy. So when we are able to come to terms with our wounds, our vulnerabilities, that's where healing begins. That's where healing begins. That is why if you go to your physician, first, what does he ask you? How do you feel today? Where do you have the pain? Where do you have the discomfort? Only based on the data you gave, then he will suggest, okay, do this test, do this one, then he has a comprehensive data. But who is feeding the initial data to the physician, to the doctor? Myself. Right? Where do you feel pain? How long have you been feeling this symptom? I am giving that information to the doctor. So based on that and based on his expertise and field of study, he comes up with diagnosis. So that is what we do in spiritual healing. We need to take the first step. God is always ready to heal us. Okay? So far good? I'm learning a lot from this. So far good? Next we enter the dark night. Dark night is not referred to the dark night, the book. Dark night of soul. Okay? The book, Dark Night of Soul, mistakenly described as a sort of terrifying and lonely doubt about the very experience of God. Who wrote the Dark Night of Soul? Yeah, the same mystic we are talking about, right? So first we talked about Sigmund Freud, right? His psychoanalysis and how he ended his life. Then the article talked about John of the Cross and spiritual exercises. Then a great saint, even to this day, very relevant, St. Francis of Assisi. Now we are going back to St. John of God, St. John of the Cross. So for some people, the title itself is terrifying. Dark Night of the Soul, right? Can you not come up with a nice title? Like we would ask John of the Cross. Why? The dark night has really nothing to do with doubt or despair. The concept of a dark night derives from a short poem written by the great mystic St. John of the Cross when he was confined in a tiny dark cell in prison for 9 months. In later years, he elaborated on the meaning of his poem in his mystical treatise called The Dark Night of the Soul. So most writers, like influential leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, when he was imprisoned many months, he came up with this, My Experiments with the Truth, his own autobiography. The father of Indian community, Indian society. He wrote this, at least started to write this great autobiography called My Experiments with the Truth. Of course, it is predicated by his own experience with Christianity when he was studying law in England and when he practiced it in South Africa. And most of his writings, his autobiography, was influenced by Matthew chapter 5, which is what is Matthew chapter 5? The Beatitudes, right? Matthew chapter, the very first 8 verses. So his book heavily deals with his exposure to Christianity in England and also in the struggles that he faced in South Africa when he was practicing law. So most influential leaders have come up with beautiful writings while they were imprisoned. So they made use of their prison time quite productively, right? So John of the Cross came up with this dark night of the soul. So we're not going through everything in this because it takes forever. So for John of the Cross, what is this dark night? It is an experience of spiritual purgation in which physical, psychological satisfactions are stripped away to leave the soul in the presence of nothing but physically invincible, silent workings of divine grace. So when somebody experiences in our own life this dark night of the soul, what is John suggesting, John of the Cross? When we are stripped of every physical and psychological satisfactions, and nothing is in the presence of nothing but physically invincible, we allow ourselves in the silent working of God's grace. What Austin Alvarez said, quoting Pope Francis. What is the healing? Healing is, I forgot. Let me go back. The title of the book says, Holiness. Holiness or healing is always an encounter between my weakness and God's grace. So when we go through these struggles of life, be it physical health or psychological, spiritual struggles or relational, all kinds of vulnerabilities, all kinds of wounds that we carry, this is called spiritual purgation. But we need to allow ourselves in this invisible working of God, which we call as divine grace. So all that we go through, that's why, what is the grace we get when we go for confession? The grace of God's mercy and forgiveness. As unnerving as it is still a profound experience of spiritual healing, not a questioning of or loss of faith. So when he's talking from his own experience of writing this book and himself going through this when he was imprisoned. So this is applicable to, in general, humanity. When we go through these struggles of life or whatever crisis of life, we come to terms with, this is called spiritual purgation, but we allow ourselves at the same time to divine grace. And such moment is not a questioning of faith or much less a loss of faith. So this is a really, what do we call, kind of twisting of ourselves, but not before any human power, but before divine grace, allowing God's grace to work in and through us. And that is healing, as in the thought of Saint John of the Cross. Okay, if you have not read at least some, there are summary forms of this classical writing, The Dark Night of the Soul. It's a very thick classical writing. But once you start reading, you want to read more and more. But if you don't have time for completing entire writing of John of the Cross, there are the summary forms of his writings, which is The Dark Night of the Soul. Okay. Next one, spiritual healing and true love. So I want to take a break. You have any questions? I'm taking break from talking, so you can talk. So far good? Yes. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, Mother Teresa's emptiness, because we know her calling was a call within a call, right? First, she was a nun for a very affluent convent called Loreto Sisters, who came to India to work for very rich families. Their school, Loreto Convent in Calcutta, Delhi, Mumbai, big cities. Loreto Sisters, I don't know which, they are from France or somewhere, or Italy, or one European country. They came to India and started schools for children of very affluent families. So she was a sister in that community. So while she was one day in a train going to Darjeeling for her retreat, she received this call, leave the convent. Leave the Loreto convent. That's not meant for you. You are meant to be in the streets of Kolkata, in the slums of Kolkata, right? So she left that community and she started working for the abandoned or the poorest people in the slums of Calcutta. And she did go through this crisis, which she mentions in her writing with her spiritual director, because she was feeling a lot of emptiness, even because she was doing a great work in India. She was getting a lot of praise and accolades, but deep within, she was feeling that emptiness. So she writes that as a famous writer on Mother Teresa's life story, or Malcolm Muggeridge, I think he's a British, if I'm not sure, a British writer who interviewed Mother Teresa when she was alive on multiple occasions. And in those interviews, she not only spoke about her achievements, but she was daring enough to talk about her own vacuums, her own struggles, how she was deeply suffering within of that gaps, despite doing big missionary work in India and beyond. Yeah, Mother Teresa's writings are also very helpful for us too. But she doesn't go as deep as St. John of the Cross or St. Francis of Assisi, but she talks about her own struggles, how she did not have that, though she did a phenomenal job externally taking care of the poor, but deep she felt that darkness within, which she shared with her spiritual director on a very regular basis. Yeah. I think she came to this city, right? Mother Teresa? Didn't she? None of you saw her in person? Did Mother Teresa ever visit San Antonio? I think she did. During the time of Bishop Flores, she came to Cathedral. I saw some photos somewhere. During the time of, I think Archbishop Gustavo met her twice. Once when he was a seminarian, I think, or a young priest in California, or in Los Angeles. I never saw her. But I've been to her tomb twice in Calcutta. Yeah. Any questions? Great. All right, let's continue. I didn't get a break from talking. I still kept talking. Okay. Spiritual healing and true love. Okay. There is a deeper level of healing. Now, he goes from physical healing to spiritual healing to a deeper healing at a spiritual level. In fact, this aspect of healing points directly to the fact of true spirituality must have a psychological component. I don't know which, if you choose to be a military, as your vocation, they do psychological testing or not, do they? For military applicants? For seminarians, like in, I think, every part of the world, psychological testing is a fundamental requirement. They do that when we enter the seminary. They do it before diaconate. They did it for you. They did for us. Yeah, that's preliminary one. But before sacred orders, they did here one for us. Before diaconate, an in-depth psychological assessment. One might say, okay, I'm spiritually, I read a lot of spiritual writing, classic writing. A candidate to the ordination might say, oh, I have great knowledge of spirituality. But even spirituality, even formation of priests, they rely so much on psychological component. That is why everyone who is entering seminary, they do psychological testing. But some dioceses also do right before ordination. Means that's a major step. So it's like very extensive testing that the psychologist asks a bunch of questions, and he asks us to do drawings, play with all kinds of modules, and he comes up with some conclusions. Okay, right? Any psychological assessment. Then the report is sent to the diocese. So unlike this one, spiritual healing, unlike the pagan worship offered by ancient Greeks and Romans merely to appease the vanity of the gods, who had no interest at all in the moral behavior of humanity, genuine spirituality calls a person into deep psychological change. Greeks have hundreds of gods, right? Hindus have millions of gods. Stone is a god in Hinduism. Monkey is a god in Hinduism. Neem tree is a god in Hinduism. Snake is a god in Hinduism. Right? Like if you go to Greece, when you go with Father Pat, you'll see a lot of Greek gods. Nike, who is a Greek god or goddess, right? Did you know that? Nike? The running shoes you wear is a name of a Greek goddess or god. And something else is also, I mentioned this in the homily. Oh, not in the homily. A couple of days ago in the gospel, Jesus entered Caesarea Philippi, right? He asked Peter, who do people say that I am? And why did Jesus chose to ask Peter that question in Caesarea Philippi? Why not in Jerusalem? Why not in Bethlehem? Why not in Nazareth? Why in Caesarea Philippi? Because that's the northernmost part of the Holy Land. That's where a lot of world religions were meeting. Paganism, pantheism, and Greek god. Greeks have a big temple there to a god called Pan. So in that place, Jesus asked this question to Peter. Who do people say that I am, and who do you say that I am? In the presence of all these mini gods, gods with lowercase g. So pagan gods, Greek gods, they want humans to appease them. Okay, you do something for you, I do something for you, right? It's a kind of mutual exchange. But genuine spirituality calls for not just I do something, you do something. Genuine spirituality calls a person into deep psychological change. So now there is marriage happening between spirituality and psychology. I see a lot of Indian Franciscan priests who are here. Some have finished their psychology PhD from St. Mary's, at least 3-4 of them, and one who just got his PhD in psychology and therapy. He became the adjunct vicar for clergy. Father John Meffridge, some of you know, right? He's a therapist, and the one who is in his office as a priest from India is a religious priest. He just defended his thesis a couple of months ago in psychology. So the church is recognizing how much psychology could offer, not just for priests, but later on priests, how they can be of great help to people in healing. I know at least 3-4 priests, they have their community here right by the airport. They're all now completing their doctoral studies at St. Mary's in psychology and family therapy, marriage and family counseling. So our spirituality is now taking a lot of elements from psychology and psychotherapy, because healing is integral. That is why what is this title? Lent, a season of for integral healing in totality. Lent is that time. So we are able to borrow ideas, insights from psychotherapy and mostly psychology. And this guy will do a good job tomorrow and day after tomorrow. He's really trained, and he has been assisting seminarians, priests in this comprehensive healing that we all need. Okay? Okay, which paragraph are we? We are at 8 o'clock. So, how do we embrace this psychological change besides spirituality in our lives for this healing? This change comes from opening your heart to love. Okay, this sentence. Genuine spirituality or Christian spirituality calls a person into a deep psychological change, and such change is possible when we open our heart to love. Go back to the previous paragraph we read. When we humbly stand before God to empty ourselves. So this healing happens when we open our hearts to love. When we open our hearts to love. And that love is shown to us from the cross. Right? Cross is that the crux, the ultimate form of love. There's no greater love that God could show, like this Sunday's first reading, right? God spared Abraham's son in the last minute, right? When Abraham was about to lift the knife and boom, your head is gone. God said, no, stop, right? Don't kill. I was just testing you, right? But God did not spare his son from the cross. God really wanted, he could have done something, right? But God did not spare his son on Mount Calvary. On Mount Moriah, Abraham's son was spared. Okay, there's a ram in that bush. Get that, kill that. But the love of God on the cross, he did not spare his son. Right? Okay, we need to open our hearts to love. So what is that true love? True love means to do God's will. How beautiful is that? True love means doing God's will, and Mary shows us that example. I am the handmaid of the Lord, let it be done to me according to your will. And Jesus said that in the Garden of Gethsemane. Lord, if it is your will, let this cup pass away from me, but your will be done. How difficult that is, even for priests to constantly seek God's will. It is said, doing God's will is difficult, but it is possible. So true love opens us to do God's will. So what is God's will? What is God's will? There are a lot of therapists out there who will tell you that it's all about connecting with divine energy. So this article, the beauty about this is, it goes back and forth. So it starts with, Sigmund Freud, then it embraces a little bit of spirituality, it goes back and forth, means it finds a connecting point, connecting dot, and it also detaches itself. So this guy is going kind of flipping back and forth, how to embrace psychology and spirituality. So he says now in this paragraph, there are so many people out there, therapists, psychologists, who say, oh, doing God's will is nothing but connecting with divine. So you can accomplish anything you desire. Anything you desire. Desire. You. The emphasis is on you. Right? Like the American the supermarkets we go to, what is this? Shopping malls we go to. The materialism. It's all about you. You deserve this. You need to get this. Customers who bought this product also bought this one. Go get it. Right? That happens on Amazon, right? So let's say tomorrow I buy something for my watch. Let's say this strap is gone and I go to Amazon and put this company called Garmin. Okay, Garmin's watch band. Morning I'll wake up, I'll get an email. Customers who bought this strap also bought this one, a case. Right? You are important. You need to buy this. Your credit card is already stored. Just hit that button. Buy. It's you. So therapists emphasize on the desire part of it. But seeking God's will is not emphasizing on our desire. Right? Let's see this. Anything you desire, but God's will is a matter of love. And Aquinas says, true love seeks the good of the other. True love seeks the good of the other. And for ages, mystics have been telling us, like John of the Cross, Saint Francis of Assisi. He was from a rich family from Milan. His father was a cloth merchant back in the day. He could have started a J.C. Penney, right? Or a Macy's, or Louis Vuitton. He had that resources. But he said, no, this is killing me. This is so true of me. When I still struggle with this. I'm in the United States, land of plenty. I come from India. When I see other priests have a better car, an Audi, oh yeah, I drove Audi for 6 months, right? When my car was when I had an accident, so the car I got was an Audi, right? So I do struggle with this materialism. Oh, this priest has this latest laptop, MacBook. It's not easy. Because I'm thrown into this culture of plenty, and I equate my value with having things. It's a struggle. It's a daily struggle. Right? It's not easy. It's tough. So we get into this cycle. For ages, mystics have been telling us that loving is about giving, not getting. Getting. Winston Churchill said something beautiful. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. Right? On the cross, he gave. Kenosis means total emptying. Nothing to keep for oneself. That's why it's a big challenge for me when my own, like if I am asked to move, like I see priests moving like a lot of stuff. On that note, religious priests are better, those belong to an order. They just go with 2 suitcases. Diocesan guys like us, we need U-Hauls. Sorry, but that's the reality. Right? What to do? We are thrown into this. We are not exempt. To do God's will, therefore, is to give of yourself through patience, forbearance, mercy, compassion, understanding, not to receive personal satisfaction from the world. What Freud said, right? Freud said, just satisfy your desire, biological, sexual, seductiveness. That's what gives meaning to your life. Freudian philosophy. But John of the Cross, Francis of Assisi, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Dorothy Day, Elizabeth Ann Seton, American saints. They show us the opposite. Christ's own self-giving. In fact, true love means to continue to give even you receive nothing but rejection and hatred in return. I want to quote Mother Teresa here. When she was living in Kolkata, taking care of the orphans, right? Actually, the Indian government was so good. Before I came here, I was teaching in school, high school. The lesson is on Mother Teresa, the entire English substitute book. So Mother Teresa's orphanages that she started in Kolkata first used to receive a lot of broken crumbs, biscuits. We call them cookies in this part of the world, but we call them biscuits. It's a biscuit company. So they used to send every week these broken biscuits because you can't pack them and sell them. So all these broken crumbs, biscuits would go to Mother Teresa's orphanages. So after a couple of years, the company was running in loss. So they stopped sending these broken biscuits to these poor children and elderly people on the streets. So Mother Teresa thought, must be something going wrong. So she goes to the company and meets the manager. The manager was already frustrated because facing a lot of loss, strike, employees are not working, there's no profit. So she takes an appointment and goes to see the manager, the owner of the company. And he was frustrated. But Mother Teresa said, give me 5 minutes. Mother Teresa said, okay, come in. That guy said, come in. She goes, Mother Teresa, with a short little lady with Indian sari bending like this. She stands in front of him. The entire US Congress stood when she came to address, the UN building. They stopped, they clapped like it was not ending anytime soon. So she goes and stands in front of this guy in his office. Please send me some biscuits in a truck. They used to send them by small trucks. He got mad. No biscuits. Get out of my office. Because he was going through a crisis. And he spat. Mother Teresa was asking like this, please send my poor boys and girls and people some biscuits. He spat. In India, if somebody spits on you, in Indian culture means you are like dirt. You are nothing. He spat like that on Mother Teresa's hands. Mother Teresa did. She did like this. Okay, that was for me. Your spitting is for me. I'll take it. But please send some biscuits. That guy moved in tears. Said, I may have a great loss, but I'm not sending you broken ones. I'm sending you the good ones. Right? How did Mother Teresa did that? Not because of her. She said, I'll take your spittle. But for my boys, for my poor people, give me something. That is kenotic form of love. Right? True love, even if you receive nothing but rejection, see, spitting on your hands is unimaginable in Indian society. And hatred in return. True love means to refuse to hate. That is, to wish harm to come upon anyone, even those who hate you. So Mother Teresa is the most contemporary example for us. So how do we do this? How do we do God's will? We have left 10 minutes. I don't think I can cover the whole. I'm adding so many stories in between. Okay, I'll tell my boss I only did so much. But I'll give you the article so you can read through, okay? Let's see what it means to do God's will. Okay. To do God's will, To do God's will essentially means to turn completely away from sin. Wow. Sin. Away from sin. That's why the Greek word metanoia means complete turnaround. Like you miss an exit on I-10, what do? If you keep going, you go to El Paso. But what you need to do? You need to take a turnaround at Wurzbach or on Dezevala or at UTSA. There are turnarounds at every intersection, right? If you're just skipping, if you keep on the, what is this lane on the side called? Access lane, or what is frontage road, you keep on going. It takes you to hill country. So, metanoia is 180-degree, complete turn away from sin. That is our functional narcissism. Yeah, this is so big in our society. Narcissism. The word narcissism came from who? It was the name of a person, Narcissus. Narcissus, again a Greek guy, okay? Narcissus, you can look up. He was a very handsome guy, right? Built, tall, slender, muscular. So he was so engrossed in himself. You know how he died? Looking at his shadow in the water. So our culture today points us in the direction, hey, look at me, desire. So the word narcissism comes from his name, Narcissus. I don't know how to spell that, his name, but narcissism, Narcissism. Narcissistic is even more complex spelling, okay? But that is prevalent in our culture today. It means to die to yourself, as in John of the Cross. John of the Cross is an opposite. We need to die to our sin. Otherwise, we'll be serving nothing but our own narcissistic desires. The shopping mall. Hey, you deserve this. You need to get this. Customers who bought this also bought that. Apple does this so trickily, right? Apple, they draw you into their ecosystem. If you go to buy their iPad, they'll also, hey, you need to buy this cable. Then you need to preserve this cable, so you need to buy a case for it. So you have a budget for $300, you get the bill for $700. Because, hey, you need this. Hey, you need this. Don't you think you need this? That is why if you look at Apple stores, their marketing mantra is very good. They only have glass windows. Right? Glass windows. Why? They want you to look at them. You cannot but look at them. Right? And look at the products they display. They want you to touch every piece of electronic gadget there. Right? They want you to touch it, feel it, try it, and then own it, and then pay it. And then even have a new thing for the Apple card. If you don't want to pay, we have a credit card for you. It's about you, me. Right? They have such a marketing technique. Right? So when you go to North Star Mall, look at the windows. You can see through the entire shop. Other stores, they have grills, they have actual metal doors and all that. So what is doing God's will? Loving God. Okay. Loving God more than anything in this world. What a task, right? Loving God more than anything in this world. Treating others with mercy and forgiveness. Putting aside all aggression, competitive behavior. Oh, tell this to Google. Right? Tell this third thing to Google or Amazon. How many Amazon outlets have come in all parts of San Antonio now? You order today afternoon, by evening you have your product in front of your door. Competition. They don't want you to go to Walmart. They said, we have it for you. Competition. Renouncing your pride. Oh, wow, pride, the original sin. right? Disobedience. I know, I can manage this. I know how to do this. God, you just be there. We'll figure this out. And guess what we inherited? OS. What is OS? You know, every phone has OS, operating software, right? Operating system. Apple phones have their own, Android have their own, but we all have OS in us. What is that? Original sin. Where did that come from? Pride. And pride is the deadliest of all the 7 capital sins. We have 7 deadliest sins, right? Pride, jealousy, pride, lust, gluttony, avarice, sloth. This is number 1, pride. But what Jesus shows us from the cross is humility. When we are prideful, we can't empty ourselves before God. If somebody is having difficulties to go for confession, that one. I can manage, I can do it. Narcissism. Next, conducting all of your interpersonal relationships with psychological honesty, integrity. Interpersonal, right? Interpersonal. Who we are inside, our wounds, our vulnerabilities, and even with others, with honesty. Living in sexual purity by not making others into mere objects for your personal pleasure, like objectification, which a society does, a big, you see all along 410, I-10, especially when I go to medical center, that's my hangout area. There's a nice coffee shop. Hangout means not with anybody, okay? Don't take me in a bad way. There's a nice coffee shop called Local Coffee. I've been going there since 8 years. That's the place where I write my homilies, write my articles. It's in the medical center. There's also one on Broadway, Merit Coffee, right? If you drive on Broadway, right in front of St. Peter's. But this place is congested. So there I see some of my Indian folks in that medical center area. So, when I take Blanco exit on 410, not Blanco, Babcock exit on 410, there's a huge commercial. Haters gonna hate, with a woman kind of very immodestly dressed. What is that? Mere objectification that the society heavily presents to us today, men and women. So these are all the ways how we can seek God's will. Okay? I'll stop it there, okay? Because it's 8:30.